I guess I'll tell you guys a little bit about the gallery, and then we'll kind of talk about, you know, what I really wanted to share with you tonight. I started the gallery in 2007 after many, many years in the film, television world, which I got into because I got into all of this because my father made television commercials when I was growing up, which was very fun. I got to be in an Oscar Mayer bologna commercial when I was a kid. He, you know, so I was kind of always around that stuff. And then when I was in college, I started working for my dad in the summers. But I loved photography. My father actually taught me how to make photographs when I was 14, 15 years old. And I really easily could have gone to Purchase to study photography. But I also loved writing, creative writing. So it wasn't really necessarily an easy decision, but Purchase is the kind of place where you really can do a lot of things. I really took advantage of Purchase. I took advantage to the point, this is a true story, where after my 5th year at Purchase, the dean of students called me into her office and told me I had to leave. That's actually true. But I knew, I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. If I'm not focusing, by the way, on anyone, I forgot my glasses, so you're a little bit of a blur. But I knew that when I was in college, it was going to be the only time in my life where I could really, you know, sit around with my professors. I loved literature. I still am a huge reader. And, you know, talk about Thomas Mann or whoever I was obsessed with at the moment, and then go and make a film and make photographs. And a lot of my friends were choreographers. And for years, during school and after school, I collaborated with a lot of friends of mine who were choreographers. I did writing for them. I shot film for them. I actually even wrote music once, which was really not a good idea, but anyway. So it was that kind of a place. I really took advantage of. I just, look, I mean, I wasn't out in the real world paying bills. So I was like, see if I could stay here for 10 years. But anyway, it was a great experience. And when I got out, I really, you know, my first love was, and I don't know, maybe still is, narrative filmmaking, which I was absolutely obsessed with. And I really recommend, you know, I could stand here and talk to you guys about so many different things. I'm incredibly opinionated to start with, but I feel like I've had a really kind of very full life making art and then being where I am now. So I really kind of understand all of the facets of an artistic life. But I lost my train of thought. Oh, anyway, you know, one thing that was really important to me was never to get to have my identity get completely caught up in what I was doing. This is something I kind of like saw very early on, was a, you know, destructive force for friends of mine who were artists and then maybe not as successful as they wanted to be. I mean, I think I've always been really lucky in the sense that, you know, if I'm really engaged with something, I'm going to be happy. You know, so when I stopped making films, gosh, about 9 years ago, I had made films my whole life, or for my whole adult life, and it was okay. Like, people kind of can't believe that it was not, you know, some dramatic, you know, shakeup in my life. I have not lost one night of sleep over it. I just kind of, I loved it. I had a great time. I'm really proud of everything I did. And then I just didn't want to do it anymore for not any complicated reason. I didn't want to do it anymore because I was spending almost all my time raising money. And it's just not me. I want to be doing things all the time. I want to be engaged all the time. And I just got really bored. I mean, I was making films, you know, such a, you know, small amount of time of my life, and all the rest of the time was trying to raise money. And I was like, this can't go on. So it's just so bizarre. I mean, I literally was lying in bed one night, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I said, I'm going to sell photography. And I got up out of bed, and I went online, and I Googled photography dealers. And then the next day, I talked to some friends of mine, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm not going to make films anymore. I'm going to be a photography dealer. And, of course, everyone thought I was insane, which actually, by the way, may turn out I was insane. But I just started doing it, and I had my best friend is the artist Peter KAYAFAS, whose work we're going to look at first. And I'd been kind of very involved with Peter's work for a while and helping him edit, and I just had a really good sense. I have a dark room to this day in my apartment. And I'd never lost my connection to photography, to what I would say is art photography. And so it felt like just a really natural transition. It was difficult, but little by little, I got more artists. I actually had pop-up shows out in LA. I had a lot of friends out in LA. I used to go out there all the time. I'd have pop-up, these weird pop-up shows in LA, and have all these crazy celebrities show up. I mean, it was really wacky and fun. And then, I got to the point where it was clear I really needed to open a public space. Peter reminded me the other day of the days when I used to say, under no circumstances am I ever going to open a public space. But I did, and it's a very tough field. We can talk about that, a little bit later if it's of interest to you guys, what it actually is really like to own a gallery. It's incredibly difficult. Unless you have artists who sell for, I'm going to be very frank, by the way, I'm definitely known for being obscenely honest. So, unless you have artists that, a Gregory Crutzen or, a Massimo Vitali or whatever, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very hard to sell art. The average person does not buy art. If they have a little bit of money saved, they buy a flat screen television, or they go on vacation, and none of these things are bad. I mean, I don't judge people who, decide to go buy the poster of a show they saw at MoMA instead of buying a $5,000 photograph. That makes perfect sense to me. But it's just a reality that's very, very difficult. And I say this to artists all the time. I think the most important, this is where I could totally go off, and this could be a totally different evening, but I'll say this very quickly and then try and get back on track. The thing that I really want artists, young artists who I talk to, which I do all the time, to know is that you're not going to make a living making art. No one in this room is going to make a living making art. You might make some money, you might sell work here or there. You are not going to make it is so rare, because the amount of artists to the amount of buyers is a horrible ratio. It is the worst ratio in the world. It is easier to sell Lamborghini cars than it is to sell art. There are more people interested. That's just a fact. So, it's really important to go into this life of being an artist knowing what the realities are so that you can be happy, so that you can live a happy life, so that it's okay to have a job. And you know what? It's also okay to have a job you love. It doesn't have to be waiting tables. It doesn't have to be some shit job that you because you're an artist, and you're going to have some shit job because you're making art. And it's like bullshit, I work with so many artists who have jobs that they love. Most of them teach, but not all of them. Peter runs a publishing company, he publishes art books, but he loves his work. And, you know, you have one life to live, and, you know, it goes by quickly. So it's really important to not get into this thing where, you know, you're kind of into some sort of self-punishing thing because you're an artist. Just be happy. You know, if next year you decide that you want to be a lawyer, fine, go to law school. It doesn't matter. You know, just do what makes you happy. So, the gallery specializes, and this has actually caused some confusion out there in the art world, because what it says on my website is that I specialize in documentary and what I call post-documentary photography. That leads to a lot of people sending me submissions of photographs from like the South Sudan and, you know, AIDS babies from the Congo or whatever, and that's not what I do. That's social documentary work. That's photojournalism. That is the exact opposite of what I do. So just to be really clear about this, the most important thing to me as a gallerist is form. I am an unabashed formalist. So Harry Callahan, for instance, is one of my favorite photographers. The reason I say that I specialize in documentary and post-documentary work is because I do specialize in work that's not staged. And I do specialize in work that's not where photography is just used as a means to an end. And like work that's, you know, very photoshopped or something like that. I love photography. I am a purist. So when I say documentary, post-documentary, that's what I'm trying to say. So I have to figure out a better way of communicating that without being this long-winded. But, you know, for me, it's all about form, always. I rarely care about the subject. I care if the subject's stupid. So if it's the most formally beautiful photograph in the world, but the subject's an embarrassment, then I'm probably not going to want to show it. But, and I always use Harry Callahan as an example because, do you guys know Harry Callahan's work? You know, he could photograph with the most mundane thing and it was just instantly elevated. That is his authorship as a photographer. That is what the camera and a certain kind of composition can do, and that's what interests me, 100%. That is what I love, which is not to say that I don't love certain staged work, Jeff Wall, Gregory Crutzen. I do, but it's just not my passion. So that's what I do. These are the artists I represent. They're all photographers with the exception of Norman Mooney. He's my one non-photographer, and I'm, you know, I don't have a good reason for why he's in there, except he's like a 6'4" Irishman with long blonde hair, and he's one of the most fabulous people I know. And he makes drawings that are very, very beautiful and all about form and composition. When people see his work, they know why I'm a sucker for it. The artists here that I start are the ones we're kind of going to focus on today. But what I really want to talk about today, getting to the point here, is my lack of interest in originality, which I know is odd. But I would argue that there's something that I refer to as the tyranny of the new that kills artists. I see work all the time from people, and it's so clear to me that their main preoccupation was doing something no one else had done, and the work sucks. And I see this all the time because people ignore their actual natural voice to do something that they think no one else has done before. A lot of people in the art world will argue very persuasively that that's the right thing to do, that new is incredibly important. And that's fine. I just don't give a shit. Can I say shit?
A few times.
Okay, have I already said it a few times? See? All right, don't tell my mom. I think actually if I haven't said anything else yet, then this is pretty good for me. I don't care. I really don't care. I've never cared. I really don't expect I'm ever going to care. Whenever start working with a new artist, the first thing I say to them is, in my gallery with me, you do not have to reinvent the wheel. Just make a great wheel. Make your wheel. That's all I care about. And I would argue that everyone has been riffing off of everyone else in the art world since the beginning of time, and there is no such thing as true originality. And often when something does seem really, really new, it is awful. I think things get overhyped all the time in the art world because they're new, and it makes me insane. So I think that there are times where things are very, very specific, like, it's a good example. I think that, you guys know Massimo Vitale's work. I've already mentioned him once. You know, he shoots beach scenes all the time that are really, really blown out, large format. I think, you know, don't go shoot a beach scene that's large format and really, really blown out. Like, oh, that's not a great idea. Like, you know, I think there are certain things that when they get really, really specific, you have to keep away from them. But life, just go shoot life. I mean, it's not about subject. There's only a finite number of subjects, but there's an infinite amount of ways of communicating because each person is totally unique. You will all have your own voice. I don't know if everyone's in this room is good, but everyone will have their own voice. So Peter, I refer to as a road photographer. He gets in a car and he drives 20,000 miles and makes photographs. Walker Evans, Lee Friedlander, he gets compared to all the time. For some people in the art world, that is a problem. I do not care. That's why I represent him. I love his work. You know, sometimes you get like a great scene and then you have a bonus, you know? I mean, the first thing I look at when I look at a photograph like this is just the formal elements. So it's not that I don't care about subject, but the first thing I look at is form. And like I said, when you get these little bonuses, it's fabulous. Road photographers love shooting signage, by the way. My mother's comment, this is so not PC, but my mother's comment about this photograph was somewhere out there there's a woman with a black eye. But anyway, signage. But, you know, these are beautiful photographs. I mean, they're just so dead on. It's a lawn. I love this photograph. Should he not shoot a lawn because people have shot lawns before? Who cares? I know people have shot airplanes before. We're going to get to a photograph in a minute that Walker Evans took that's incredibly similar to this. I don't care. I love this photograph. I know this photograph is funny, by the way. I am aware of that. But again, the first thing I see is the form. And the bathing suits, to me, which are funny, is part of what makes this photograph so formally strong to me. And I do find it very touching, frankly. Love this photograph. Own this photograph. So this is a new series that Peter's doing, and we're working on the book right now. And I showed it last spring. I don't know if any of you saw it. But this is the first time in Peter's life as a photographer, and he's been shooting. He's 40 years old. His father owns a very prominent printing. His father printed for every famous photographer in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, still does, but outside of Boston, his mother owns a gallery, blah, blah, blah. Peter's been shooting since he was like 4 years old. But this is the first time Peter's ever done a really specific series. So he's doing the series on these old abandoned structures out in the Plains states. Talk about formal. And I love this project. I'm really proud of him. I think that this is a real evolution, and I don't mean that he's not going to go back to just randomly shooting things on his journeys, but I think that this is a beautiful kind of example of just the kind of natural development that happened for him.
Now, I'm sorry, how's the process? He start and then you collaborate with him? I mean,
I'm a very, very collaborative gallerist. So people, like when people come to me and they say they want to work, you know, they want to work with me, they want to be part of the gallery, I tell people right off the bat that what they need to know is that I will be the most overbearing person in their life. So, you know, this has to be really clear from the get-go. I do not like surprise. There's a lot of reasons why I work the way I work. I mean, I think the biggest one is that coming from a film background, I know how important collaboration is. So I have this joke, which is nice. It's so not nice of me to be picking on this population, but I don't know if any of you have ever gone to a really terrible modern dance concert, but I've been to many. And I always say that the reason modern dance can just go so far off the rails is because there's not a natural collaborator built into that process. There's not. And with the other arts where there are natural collaborators built in, often you see the strongest work come out of that, because it's like checks and balances. So when I'm making a film and I say to my costume designer, I want the main character dressed this way, it's so great when she says to me, what about this way? That is, and if I say, well, I don't get it, what are you thinking? And she says, this is what I'm thinking. And I say, well, I really don't see that. And she says, but Sasha, think about this. And we go back and forth for a half an hour, and she wins, and she's right. That makes me look so much better. I mean, and it makes her, it's just, I just totally believe in it. I make my artists defend their work to me all the time. I argue with them all the time. Even if they bring something into me and I think it's a home run, I pretend I don't think it's a home run. Because I want them to defend it anyway, because that process of defending your work and talking it out and going over it, turning over every angle of it is so important. So, you know, look, we know about, well, I don't know if you guys know about this, but, you know, there's a very famous case of great writer Raymond Carver. It's been kind of come to light in the past number of years, particularly that his editor basically rewrote his work. And that was like a big scandal. He's considered one of the most important American short story writers of all time. And you know, that was, you know, very scandalous when it came out. I kind of am like, who gives a shit? By the way, he was my idol, Raymond Carver, and I still don't care. Like, who cares? Whatever. So, I mean, Lennon and McCartney. Neither of them were great without the other one. You know, collaboration is a really, really meaningful thing. Having to, like, really argue it out is a great process. So that's what goes on in the gallery. And when I said I don't like surprises, I had one artist who I do not work with anymore who came to me and said, this is body of work that I want to do for my next show, and it was terrible. And he thought it was done. So, you know, I think collaboration is key. All right, so Peter, Walker Evans. Walker Evans. Walker Evans. Lee Friedlander. 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 So, to me, these guys are all doing the same thing. But that doesn't mean you can't tell once you are really, really immersed in the work. I can tell. Look, not always, believe me. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, that I would always know, but for the most part, I know the difference between a Friedlander and a Walker Evans or a Peter KAYAFAS or whoever, because there are these subtle differences that come from their individual voices. And that's the thing that I'm always trying to tell people when I say, don't worry about some big, new, original thing. Just be yourself. It will come through. So I'm not showing you this work to say there's no difference. I'm showing you this work to say that they're working within the same kind of milieu, and there are differences. Paul McDonough, street photographer. Paul's my oldest artist. He's 70. Talk about collaboration. Paul was a contemporary of very good friends with Gary Winogrand, Lee Friedlander, Joel Meyerowitz, all those guys used to go out and shoot together. Paul does not have the self-promotion gene. He just doesn't have it. It makes him very, very uncomfortable. So he never really promoted his work. He's a fabulous teacher. And someone introduced me to him and said I should go look at his work. And I went out to his studio, and it was like, you know, discovering buried treasure. It was one of the most, I remember leaving and just my head was exploding. I was so happy. It was just the most exciting thing in the world. So I edit all of Paul's work. He hates doing it. He won't do it. So any body of work you see of Paul's, I've done all of it. That's not a secret. He's, you know, people know that. So we've had 2 shows of his work. I pick every image. I mean, that's the way we work together. Street photographers. So here's Paul. This is the first thing I see when I walk into my apartment. He greets me. This is the cover of the book we did. Now, I just going back to something we were talking about a little bit before, this, you know, it gets a little tricky with street photography in terms of talking about formalism. Paul is my favorite street photographer, above Gary Winogrand. He goes crazy when I say that, but it's true. Above anyone else, because I think he's so formally strong. Having said that, the narratives in his work blow me away. I mean, what kills me ultimately are the narratives that run through his work and a lot of street photography. And I think it's one of the most beautiful and moving things about street photography are these narratives that kind of pop up in these still images. Like, what the hell? I mean, talk about what the hell. I mean, you know, there's an entire story here. So just a little side note, so you don't think street photography is all getting lucky. Paul waited until the third element entered this picture, which was the old lady. And it, to me, makes the photograph. I grew up in New York City, so when I was a kid, the Hare Krishnas were still around. I totally missed them. I don't know where they went. They were so fabulous.
And they're free lunches.
They were so happy. They were just like, you know, singing and anyway. So yeah, we used to have these Hare Krishnas all over the place. It was so bizarre. Anyway, different time. Gotta love that afro. But look at how formally strong this photograph is. I mean, it's just astounding. I mean, insane. I am like so incredibly, unabashedly in love with Paul's work that even though I look at it all the time, it makes me so happy. I mean, come on, just nuts. Let me just make a point here. You know, when I first started looking at Paul's work, I had to do the same thing I do when I watch old movies. It's a trick I do, which is I have to, nostalgia cannot come into it. So I have to try and imagine that everything I'm seeing is not old. Because I used to love watching old movies, and I used to actually have this happen when, and actually it still does happen, like, you know, I love French films, and at one point I was like, am I like, why do I love every French film? They can't all be good. Like, it's just foreign to me. So it was like, got extra credit somehow. You have to learn how to kind of, you know, look at old work, and it's not easy to do, but somehow take away the fun of the nostalgia and really still be able to just clearly look, is it a good photograph? Is it a strong photograph? I mean, you know, you don't need to work too hard to know this is a great photograph. He's just fabulous. I love him. I used to have those same work boots too, so I really love him. I mean, what is going on with his head? Anyway. I mean, look at these compositions you got. How about this? I mean, is that not insane? Love her. With her hat box. You've got to love this dude who's like not paying attention to the woman he's with because he's checking this. Gary Winogrand. Gary Winogrand. Very famous Gary Winogrand. Gary. Helen Levitt. We love Helen Levitt. One of the best street photographers of all time, definitely known for photographing children. And there's no question that Helen, I hope she wouldn't mind if I call her Helen, she just died. She was like 10,000 years old. She had a weekly poker game, by the way, with like...
It's Helen.
Helen! Was I not supposed to say she had a weekly poker game? But anyway, up until fairly recently, she was like 100. Something about these photography people, because Harry Callahan's widow, Eleanor, just died, and she was like 99 or 95. She was you know, his photographs of her, to me, one of the best series of photographs ever made. But Helen obviously was more comfortable, you know, shooting kids. As I don't know if you guys have all gone out on the streets and made photographs, but it can be intimidating. I'm not comfortable doing it myself, you know, going up to strangers. And so Helen was, I mean, this is just amazing. Yeah, right, I know, I know, times are different. Cartier-Bresson. You know, Helen Levitt and Cartier-Bresson were basically, you know, making these photographs around the same time. The great Eleanor Carucci. Ellen, I don't know if any of you have met Eleanor, but she's, okay, so, you know, she's one of the all-time great human beings. Intimate photographer, diaristic photographer, I don't know what to call Eleanor. When I say intimate photographer, it sounds very like porny, I don't know, it's like weird. But, you know, Nan, Sally, that tradition of, you know, Eleanor didn't reinvent the wheel. But Eleanor is arguably my most famous photographer that I work with. And Eleanor is very famous. I mean, she shows all over the world all the time. But she's just really fucking good. Great photograph. And often very nude, but I've become desensitized to nude Eleanor. Love shooting close-ups. One thing I really, really love about Eleanor is that she does tend to hop around a little bit. Like, she does love shooting these close-ups. There are a lot of them. I could have brought in a ton of examples. And then you have a photograph like this that's kind of more snapshot aesthetic. And, you know, this is obviously not snap. I mean, she's very comfortable. She really trusts her voice. And you know, I love that. Sally Mann. I love Sally's work, but I definitely think it's, you know, more precious than Eleanor's work. I mean, I think you have like Nan on one side, who's can be very, very snapshot-y, and Sally on the other, and then Eleanor's, to me, sort of in the middle. So this is Nan. And Nan's work has changed over time. I mean, and Sally's work's changed over time. Andrew BOROWIEC, topographic photographer. Just had a show of his a couple months ago, or a month ago. I think he's a genius. I mean, I really think he's a genius. Not reinventing the wheel. He is a straight topographic photographer. What's very different to me about Andrew's work is how dense it is. It is always incredibly dense. I mean, there's, you know, a couple of examples that we'll see that are a little bit less chaotic, but this is all from a series called Along the Ohio, which he was working on for many, 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 many years, and which is very famous. It's collected in so many museums. I mean, this is just, you know, ridiculous. I think that for me, and I know that a lot of other people don't feel this way, so let me just say that, but I really love this work. I very comfortably live with it at home. I understand that for a lot of people it's too bleak. But for me, and I think for people who are like me, the real strength of the formal qualities is a beautiful thing that kind of balances out the ways in which it's bleak. And I know that that works for me. So I think, you know, formal elements and strong formal qualities is the, like, I think of it as the initial seduction. You know, if you want to show me something maybe that's not so easy to look at, when you start with a strong formal element, it's like, come on, come in, you know, it's going to be okay. And I really feel that way with Andrew's work. I know it's bleak. I'm not, you know, living on another planet. I understand that this is, it's tough. But I think this is beautiful at the same time. I mean, not, you know, not to say that these scenes aren't difficult to see, you know, people living in, you know, environments that are, you know. I love this guy mowing his lawn. Joe Deal. Joe Deal. Joe. 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 Frank Golke. Golke. Love this work. I do have a thing for topographic photographers, I will say. Not soulless, I'm not a fan of the Beschers personally. I mean, I don't even get it, to be perfectly honest. But I think when there's some, like Andrew lives in Ohio, he has great love for what he's photographing. I think that that's really important. And I think the best topographic photographers, even when they show things that aren't, you know, uplifting necessarily, have a lot of love for their subjects. I mean, I think it's what makes Robert Adams the greatest topographic photographer of all time. Speaking of which, I'm not showing the kind of more famous Robert Adams photographs, but anyway, these are all Robert Adams. I mean, this is just an exercise in you know, form. Right, that could be a Walker Evans. And, you know, so much of this just crosses over. Robert Adams, Stephen Shore. I mean, is someone going to really argue that Stephen Shore is completely original? I mean, it's ridiculous. And he's fucking great. I mean, I love him. He's one of my favorite photographers. So I think I was kind of running out of time here, so I only have a few of poor Kate, whose exhibition is up in the gallery right now. And I just was like, I'm just going to call her an environmental photographer. That's really, you know, I don't know what to call Kate. I mean, her parents were environmentalists, which is why I actually think her environmental work is my favorite. Like, there's such authenticity. I see so many bodies of work about the environment and man's destruction of the environment and yada, 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 that is so without point of view. Kate's work is so, it's just so authentic. It just feels so real to me. She's really photographing what she knows and what she loves. So this is the work that we have up in the gallery now. It's a series she did on these birds. And they're incredibly beautiful in person. She's very well known for the series she did on deer beds. So these are places on Block Island where deers have slept. She loves photographing trees. And I didn't write who I was comparing her to, because it's such a bizarre comparison, but I just couldn't resist throwing up some Harry Callahan. Sorry, that's such a bad reproduction, but. And I love putting Kate with Callahan because it's so not obvious. And I'm not doing it to say that Kate, that her body of work and who she is really in any way connected to Harry Callahan. But what I am saying is that there is so much crossover. So to try and limit yourself anyway to, like, I mean, look at Joel Sternfeld's career. Who the heck knows what he's going to do next? I mean, there are certain photographers who kind of get in a groove and don't seem to get out of it. But, you know, there are a lot of other photographers who just so strongly follow their heart and their intuition. And at the end of the day, it all connects. But there is just so much room for crossover. Harry. And even within my own photographers, this is a photograph Kate made post-Katrina. This is Andrew post-Katrina. Same subject, totally different photographs. This is a photograph by one of my artists, Wolkoff. This is outside of Moscow. This is a photograph by one of my artists, David Nadell, in Montana. I know it's a Yola photograph for so many reasons. And I know that's a David photograph for so many reasons. But, you know, they're both photographing trees, basically. So, you know, I think that what I'm trying to say is just photograph what you want to photograph. And don't worry about it. Once you start worrying about it and coming up with some like wacky thesis of what, it's gonna suck. It just is. Sorry. You have to go with what your voice is. You really do. You know, when I was making films, one of the first films that was just totally, you know, blew me away and made me want to be a filmmaker was this film that no one in this room, I'm sure, has seen. A very obscure film by John Sayles called Return of the Secaucus 7, in which nothing happens. And it's basically a bunch of old friends reuniting and like sitting around talking and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, like, it was so real. It was just so authentic. And I was like, wow, you can make films like that? And for many, many years, those are the kind of films I wanted to make. And the strangest thing would happen every time I'd sit down and write, that I would write stuff that wasn't even close to that style. Because my voice, my natural voice, was totally different. And I really fought against it. It was very upsetting. You know, I really wanted to be this, like, Desika, like the bicycle thief. Like, I wanted to be, you know, a real naturalistic filmmaker, and it's not at all what I wrote. And I was always like, what's happening? Like, it was just, I felt like I was betraying myself. But, you know, eventually I had to just give in to, like, what my natural voice was, which was much more whimsical, much more surreal. And those are the films I wound up making. And it doesn't mean that one day I wouldn't have wound up making a more naturalistic film or whatever, but you have a voice and you can't fight it. If you fight it, you will not make good work. It's impossible. I mean, it is literally impossible. The only way to make good or even great work is just to be who you are. And I will tell you something, most of my photographers worry about whether or not they're being original, you know. I feel like I shouldn't say that, but anyway, it's true. Most artists I know, and I know some very famous photographers who, you know, get very worried about all these things that I'm talking about because the industry is so demanding of the next new thing. And I think it's just awful, and I think it's stifling to people. And so I really just hope for all of you guys and all the young artists that I meet all the time that you'll just remember that everyone is connected. New is basically bullshit, and most of the best work that's been made is riffing off of someone else and heavily influenced by someone else. And that's fine. From a very practical point of view, I think it's important, like David Nadell, David Nadell and I had this show last winter, just about a year ago, of this work. This series is called, this is actually not a great example, but I was wanting to compare it to Yola's, but it's called the Burn series, and it's all northern Montana, northwest Montana post-wildfires. And the work got a lot of attention. It's incredibly beautiful. This is not my favorite one, but it got a lot of attention. We sold a lot of work. And David and I had a very frank talk about his next show. and what he's working on. And, you know, we came to the conclusion together that his next show should be another group of these photographs of the Burns series. Because I think it's, you know, if you want to be in the industry, and this is something I also talk to people all the time, like you have to, like I don't believe in editioning. I don't think it makes any sense. Having said that, everything in the gallery is editioned. And not only that, but editions are small if I have my way. So philosophically, I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, you know, it's like trying to put your foot in a shoe that's not the right size. I mean, photography is all about reproduction. So how can editioning make any sense philosophically? It doesn't. We all know it doesn't. But we've all decided to play a game. And if you're going to play by the rules. So, you know, I try and break the rules when I can in ways that I feel like are not going to be really detrimental to either my artists or to my reputation or to the health of the gallery. But, you know, you can pick and choose, you know, ways in which you can break the rules. So, having said that, I think it's really important, you know, if you were, you know, you're starting out and you really want to be known, whether it's that you're in a gallery or you're meeting a lot of gallerists, you're going to portfolio reviews and people, let me just tell you guys something. Portfolio reviews are really important. It is the best way to meet people who can influence your career. I work with artists that I picked up at portfolio reviews. Brian Clamp just had a show of an artist who he met at a portfolio review. So they really are great. I mean, you know, most galleries don't want you dropping off work. You know, it's very hard. I mean, I know it feels terrible sometimes. Like, how am I gonna, you know, get Sasha or Brian or Michael Foley or Julie Saul or Yancey Richardson or Yossi Milo? How am I gonna get these guys to see my work if they are not accepting submissions? The way we see work is at portfolio reviews and by recommendation. So it would not surprise me at all if I get a call from one of my colleagues that went to PhotoFest saying, Sasha, I saw some work you should see. It happens all the time. All the time. Be out in the industry, be meeting people, go to Aperture events, which are like big networking opportunities. Like, it's really important. I mean, I remember, I'm blanking on her name, but there's an artist who, you know, I would always just kind of see out, and eventually I like got curious about her work and I looked it up, and now she's not right for the gallery, but I've like recommended her to people. And if I had a group show that, I actually did put her in a group show once, but if I had another group show that she was appropriate for, I'd like, gallery owners are people, if I haven't made that really clear. You know, we're not the company, we're not the corporation, we're people, we have taste. And that's the other thing, by the way, guys, like when you meet anyone who you want to, you know, help you out, you know, be really nice. Like, being really nice helps. Like, when people are really nice to me, I generally remember them. You know, I mean, it's just a lot of common sense. But, you know, I think that when you're really trying to, you know, make a name for yourself, you want to, I'm not saying don't shoot in different styles, don't present it. Don't throw everything in the kitchen sink up on your website, people. It's very bad. You know, when I go to look at work on someone's website and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing, it's not good. You know, I'm a very big believer in less is more. So, you know, edit your websites down. Try and focus on one thing for the public, and then you can be messing around on your own. But the public doesn't need to see the whole process. So I think it's fine to shoot in different styles. But I do think you also don't want to be jack of all trades, master of none. You know, black and white and color are phenomenally different ways of seeing. So, you know, I would say first and foremost, go with your gut. Even if it's tough, make a decision. And make sure you really know one of them 100%, like you've nailed it before you start jumping back and forth, because I can't imagine it doesn't screw you up to a certain extent. Because one is just all about positive and negative, and the other one is about color. And those two things are very different. Most of my photographers, I don't know if most of them, but a good, maybe half of my photographers shoot large format. You know, that's, you know, something that I've noticed, you know, goes across the Atlantic. I mean, you know, Guido's, my Italian photographer, shoots large format. I find it a little harder to work with people who are far away for the reasons that I probably outlined. You know, I work very closely. Guido and I write a lot, you know, I mean, we write back and forth a lot. And we've spent time together, so we're really comfortable with each other. I love him, he's a wonderful person. And, but it is a little bit harder for me. But there are plenty of gallerists that don't want to have a conversation with their artists, so they don't care. But no, I haven't noticed anything as far as style. I mean, I think for a while we were seeing like very specific types of work coming out of Germany, you know. But, you know, I think that's calmed down a bit. There's soul. Soul has been let back into work. It was missing for a while there, but I'm not going to say whose fault that is. I mean, I think I used to prefer black and white, but I don't anymore at all. I find them, you know, both really, really exciting. I also, I mean, I think what Kate does is pretty neat because she shoots in color, but I mean, the deer beds are obviously very green, but a lot of her work is, you know, not, it's almost more about things that you would think of as being, you know, black and white concerns. You know, the birds are in color. It's just very subtle, but they actually are shot in color. But no, I don't have a preference. There's a lot of things I don't care about. I don't care how you spend your days. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what degrees you have. I don't care what camera you use, and I don't care what you print on. What I care about is that I like you, that I want to spend time with you, that you know art history. I'm not comfortable, and this is just me, okay? I'm not comfortable working with artists who, if I say, you know, Helen Levitt, the person doesn't know who I'm talking about. Now, there's so many artists, I don't know who a lot of them are. You know, I have conversations every day with colleagues who say, you know, I saw so-and-so show, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. So I'm not talking about being like an encyclopedia, but I do think it's key to know who the most important people were in the photography world. I think it's good to know, you know, art history in general. Having said that, I failed art history, but my mother's still trying to figure that out. My professor, who's one of the most famous art historians in the world, Irving Sandler, was, you know, it was like it was a lecture class, so it was dark, and he would pace back and forth, and I would fall asleep. So that was predictable. But anyway, I think it's really important that, like, when I'm working with an artist and I reference someone, so I make reference to an artist that you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to reference someone obscure. It's not a test, but that we can talk, and that you as an artist are riffing off of these people. It's very important. And you know, it's really important to know what you don't like. I mean, I think it's just as important to go see a show. If you go see a show and you don't like it, think about why you don't like it. Don't just say, I didn't like it, at the end, I'm gonna go have a burger. Think about why you didn't like it. All these conversations that you can have with like friends, peers, or just in your own head are crucial. I do it all the time. I want you guys to know that. I do homework all the time. I read about photography all the time. And this is what I used to do as a filmmaker, and I do the exact same thing, even when I don't want to, because I know I always have a lot to learn. I own a gallery that's fairly successful, and I still know how much I don't know. And there's some great writers saying some really smart things. And sometimes I love doing it, I'm really in the mood. Sometimes I don't, but I feel like it's been a week and I haven't read anything, and so I make myself do it. And I make myself go to see shows, even when I don't have the time. So, you know, I don't care about, what I care about is that you make a great photograph, you really understand photography, what photography is, what it's capable of, the way it's capable of transforming a, you know, if I can find what I mean, that's insane, but that's photography. And you know, when Harry Callahan photographed his wife Eleanor, those photographs are so moving. And she was not like a classically beautiful woman. And in his hands, it's just astounding. But that's what photography is, and that's what I care about. Now, you know, I have very high standards. My artists will tell you that, you know, if they show me a print and the sidewalk has any pink in it, my face will turn red and my head will explode. You know, so I don't care whether it's a C print or a digital C print or an ink print. It just has to be, I don't, you know, if the person in the photograph is yellow, then I'm going to assume they were on their way to the hospital. Okay, so, you know, I want everything to be, if I'm asking someone to spend thousands of dollars, and this may be someone wealthy for whom it's no big deal, but it may be someone, you know, I have a client who saw a photograph of Peter's once. She fell in love with it. She couldn't afford it. She works with the homeless population, so she's a, you know, she's a city worker, city employee. Year and a half after she saw it, she called me up and she said, Sasha, I've saved money for that photograph. I mean, that's just amazing, you know? So I want to make sure that everyone who comes in and buys work from me gets a perfect print, which means when you make a print, you always have a match print. Every photograph that you bring into the gallery of the same thing should match exactly. So, you know, these kinds of things, it's just, you know, being an artist and being a, you know, free-spirited artist doesn't mean, you know, not being a total professional. And I will not work with anyone who's not a total professional. I don't, you know, no being late, you know, no coming in and not having your prints that you were supposed to have. Not, I mean, you know, we all have to work really hard. I work really hard. So it's you know, it's a true collaboration and everyone needs to pull their weight. But that was a very long answer. But no, I do not care what kind of prints they are.